If you've ever typed how to draw the face, then you've probably come across the Loomis Head. And for good reason, it is a fantastic starting point to learn how to construct the head. But if you ever want to learn how to draw faces from your imagination from any angle, then it's not enough. This video, I'm going to show you the basic proportions of a male and a female head, and I'm going to show you how I practice the head in order to be able to construct it from imagination from every angle. Let's get into it. The good news about the head is that while it is extremely complicated to get accurately, you can have some basic patterns that will get you 90% of the way there and set you up to draw from imagination. So let's jump in and look at these proportions. I've demonstrated the male and female head from two angles, and it always starts with an egg-like mass. So this is the side profile. Draw an egg-like mass, that means it's like an oval, and draw a halfway line through it. So measure a line out so that it splits directly in half to the oval. This is important because what you're going to do is you're going to take that distance and put it below the mass to dictate where your chin's going to be. So draw a line that's the same distance as half your face, and that becomes your chin. And we're keeping in line with Loomis's teachings exactly here. As you can see, we've separated this into thirds horizontally and halves vertically, right? So I want you to be very aware here of the pattern we're seeing. You see how we've split the head into 6 boxes and how the skull and the jaw fit into 5 of the 6 boxes. This bottom right box here is empty. Now this is going to be important when we come to drawing heads from imagination. Let's see what I'm doing here. I've split the head, the middle box, which we'll call B, into equal thirds as well. Highlighted here, this is box B. Split it into equal thirds because these each represent something important about the features of the face. So the next step is drawing a circle inside the mass of the skull that we've drawn, and that's going to represent the side plane of the head. Now, it doesn't need to be entirely accurate. For your sake here, I've put down maybe like the measurement you'd want, maybe 1/3 above inside the face, but you can just put it to look like I have here. And now we're finally putting down the features. So as you can see, the third lines of the head represent the eyebrow, the nose, and the chin. And now this is where our separation of box B comes into play, where you can see how the eyeball fits into the first separation of box B. That's the first third of box B. And do you see that line from the eyeball to the second third? That is our cheekbone, right? That's how we get the depth of the eye. Now, jumping to the bottom of the face, we've separated the final plane, that's box C, in half to find the mouth. And the mouth can be just essentially halfway between the chin and the nose. So step 8 is to draw the ear out, and the ear is simple. It essentially takes up the entire length of box B, right? Now you can vary it depending on the character, but it connects from the bottom of the nose to the top of the eyebrow. And finally, we're going to connect the neck out, and that final box that isn't part of the head is where the neck slots into the head, right? So you can see how all of these pieces, all these guidelines have a certain role, and especially here, the top of that inner circle is where the hairline connects to. And here we've got the head, right? And we have a pretty accurate guide for how the skull looks that we're now going to draw in front view. Now, front view follows the exact same guidelines as the side profile, except you have to adjust for a bit of foreshortening. And all that means is that from the front view, the head is narrower. The depth between the eyes and the ears decreasing in size, right? So the ears are going to be a little bit smaller. As you can see here, the eyebrows wrap around. Notice that harsh line on the side of the head. That is making sure that we're remembering that there's a side plane to this head, right? The head sort of gets wider as it goes back. So you do see a side plane. And I'm following the exact same indications here that we've drawn out. And as we put the ear down, notice how it's smaller, right? It's smaller than it doesn't reach the eyebrow to the bottom of the nose anymore because there is some distance that we have to account for. But otherwise, exact same proportions. And as we draw our neck out, it sort of comes right from behind the ear and goes about straight down. Now, once again, these are average proportions, and they're largely, like, this is the stereotypical Caucasian masculine face. Now, different ethnicities, different races, different skull types are gonna have different patterns. But as we're drawing this female here, you'll see that the exact same patterns apply, right? We've separated the head into thirds, and in the middle box B, we've separated that into thirds as well. And from there, we're gonna have all the guidelines we need to draw the face accurately. Some important distinctions for the female head is that female heads tend to have a number of features that separate them from male heads. For one, the neck is thinner, the jaw is smaller, the forehead slope that we're drawing now tends to be straighter rather than more sloped. The male head's more sloped. The eyes. Now, human eyes all are generally the same size, but on a female skull, which is smaller than the male head, it looks like it's bigger. So females tend to have bigger eyes relative to their head, and their ears are smaller. So you can see all those individual distinctions have made a face that looks more female. And now we're showing this from a front view as well. Same foreshortening rules apply. And yeah, here we're going for a looser interpretation of the proportions that we talked about. And you can see I drew some curves on the side of the face to represent this area of the face. So maybe you can see the curves are to represent the connection between the eyebrow ridge to the eye to the cheek and then all the way down to the jaw. And yeah, the hairline also, once again, the top of the circle, the ears get a little bit smaller, and this is how we draw both of the faces from both angles. Now let's get into what we need to practice in order to effectively draw heads from any angle, because these proportions are not going to cut it when we're trying to create novel angles to draw our head. So when we use the Loomis Head, it can be hard because we're starting with the base of a circle. And this is commonly said in Hampton's book, that a circle is not a strong starting point for a shape because there is absolutely no direction to it, right? So that is the primary issue with Loomis's head, is that you sort of have to know how to structure a head in order to draw it correctly from only a circle, right? Someone who doesn't really understand form isn't going to know how to follow the contours of the circle very well. So it sort of relies on the student to already know how to construct the head, or at least know how to construct forms properly. If I drew this head and I did this, how would I know how to build out the solid forms of the head? I don't really. I sort of just have to follow the formula, right? And this is as far as Loomis takes us. It's these contour lines. But do you see how, I don't know about you, but this doesn't look like a really believable head shape to me. So how I found a way to balance this was to study an artist like Tom Fox. Tom Fox approaches the anatomy problem in a much more structured way. Now, this can be really complicated, right? But we can simplify and take a look at how he draws the head. For example, here. It is still a complex piece, but it is clearly much more structured. It all starts from a box. And you know, I talk about the box almost 24/7. But there's a reason that so many artists who specialize in drawing from imagination, as Tom Fox does, start with the box. because it is the easiest place to build out more detailed form. For example, you can see here how he starts with the box, but now he is evolved into this organic plane with a lot of structured planes as well. And that's what we're trying to go for. So in order to counteract the softness of the Loomis head that doesn't give you a clear direction, what we have to do is head in the opposite direction and practice seeing the cube in the head, right? So as you saw in the beginning of the video, a lot of my drawings from imagination start with the box before I put the face in. Because if you start with structure, you can always work around it. But it's hard to go from something organic to something clearly structured, right? It's always better to start with the box in mind, because the box dictates your perspective. And from there, what we can do is put a face in. Right? The box isn't something we're going to draw our entire character like being a box, right? This isn't Minecraft. But what the box does is it gives us a great hint towards the perspective. And that's how we're going to build out all the more organic forms. So what exercise can you do to build out the box in a way that represents the head? Well, as we saw in the proportion guide, we draw this mass, right? This oval mass, and then we split it in half, and then this half gets duplicated and becomes the jaw. Now, what do you notice about this? Well, if we take the marks like this, we can create a box around it. And notice what we have here? We have 5 little squares, right? So what you want to practice is drawing these 5 little squares in form. So first you have, this is how you do it from the start. You start with a 3 by 2 piece of chocolate, right? 3 pieces by 2. What you're going to do is you're going to break off one piece. So you have this. Now always think about the whole piece of paper first, and then as you're drawing it, try to cut out the last piece. So for example, if you're drawing from imagination, I'm drawing a line out, right? Let's say this is the full line. I know that this line has to be split 3 times. So as I'm drawing this, I know this has to be split twice. So I'm keeping a mental note of where these half and third lines are. And then I'm following the perspective, imagining that these lines are meeting. And there is where they sort of bisect the figure. Boom. And you see, that's how we have the 5 pieces in perspective now. Now, we do what we do to draw a cube, right? We just continue the form at a 90 degree angle to the plane we've drawn. And here, we're creating our head box, right? And this is how we're creating the basic constructed mannequin for our head, where we will then put the Loomis head within, right? Now we know how to put a circle into a cube, right? And if you don't, then I will recommend a video after this, so stick around. But you see how here we can now fit the form in, and we're using all the things we learned in the proportions, right? So if this is the brow ridge, what do? We separate this into 3. Well, I guess it's down here. So we separate this into 3. As you can see, the eye sits on the first. And the second is going to be the cheekbone, right? So the cheekbone's like this. Right? And it goes in and comes out. The mouth is halfway below the nose and the chin. And it goes around. You see how from these cubes we can create a face. So let's say you don't even feel comfortable drawing the 5-piece head box, right? Because that itself takes a little bit of practice. What can you do? Well, you're gonna practice just basic form subtraction. So you're gonna practice getting a rectangle, and creating that sort of 2x3 cube. So imagine 3 and then 2. Try to get it. It doesn't need to be absolutely accurate, but try to get it somewhat looking like a rectangular box. And then once you draw the whole box, then you practice taking away one side, one cube in that sequence, right? And as you're doing this, always be mindful what this box represents, right? So let's show what this represents. Well, I'll draw it down here. In reality, what this piece represents is the head at that angle. So from here, we'll translate this view into the Loomis Head view, right? And Morpho shows a bit of this, where let's say you can take this bottom end and this end, and you can create the draw from that. So what Morpho does is he turns these hard edges into a softer edge that represent the chin and the bottom of the head, right? And what we're doing is looking at this cube and trying to map an equivalent organic form, something like this, right? And the bottom edge here is the bottom of your skull, and here's the bottom of your chin, right? And where would the eyebrow ridge be? Well, it would be right here. So it would be the center of this. Eyebrow ridge would be there, and then ear would be right here, right? Let's draw the eyebrows. The eye socket would be down here. Chin would be here, and maybe the nose would peek out slightly. And the hair would wrap around like this. And this is where actually the neck would fit, right behind the... right like this. Right, so you see how we can develop the head at more unique angles only once we can understand the most basic form that it fits within. Because you're not going to be able to... I cannot even comprehend this organic form at every angle. That's really difficult. So you have to take steps further back and back in order to break the form down into more understandable pieces. And the most understandable piece is the box, which always goes back to why I harken on the box a lot. But you see, like this, we got to think about the most basic forms we can rotate. Right? The neck would be here. Right? But yeah, so practice just your rectangles. This. Practice breaking it into thirds. Like this. And then practice taking away a piece. And before you can effectively draw the head as it looks from every angle, you want to be able to A, draw just a box from every angle, right? Which is why the box exercise that I talk about in almost every video is so important. You want to be able to represent a human head looking up with only the box, right? Looking down. Right? And then you want to be able to make it even more accurate to the shape. So then you take out one corner piece of it. And this is where we'll get to more realistic proportions, right? And it's barely realistic at this point. But once we get here, and now draw through the box, right? If you can keep in mind that, like this Morpho shape right here, this curvature, it'll help you plot the neck better, right? The neck fits in like that. And once we get to this level, you can start adding more basic pieces, right? So from here, well, what can we do? We can curve out the top of the head now, and we can include that cut in that we talked about in the proportions. We can cut this in, right? And that's going to be the eye. Now the eye can come out of it like this, right? And the nose is like, the nose is essentially if you got a piece of paper and sort of cut it into the head like this, had it intersect with the head here, and you only took the part that came out of the head, kept that. See, it's like a corner piece shoved into the head. It's a piece going this way, a rectangle going that way, right? But here we can start constructing more accurate forms of the head, but always thinking in terms of form instead of in terms of contours and curvature, because curvature is an unreliable thing to move around in your head. It's really difficult to think of it simply. It's literally why video games start out low poly, because curves are really just a bunch of tiny straight lines. So if you're going to map a curve in your head, you really have to understand the straight lines that it is made of. So you have, there we go. You see, we can build out, and remember, always thinking about the neck through the head, right? Thinking about the jaw through the head, finding out where the neck would fit, like that, right? So practice your basic forms. That's how we draw anything, and that's especially how we draw the head from different angles. What I've just shown you is the same process. And if you want to draw more diverse heads, more creative heads, then you just practice drawing heads on Pinterest. Just practice a bunch of heads, practice celebrity heads, whatever floats your boat, honestly. But the foundational skill is always going to be your comfort with the basic forms. So if you haven't watched this video, I implore you to please do so. It will make a difference in your drawing. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching these videos. If you like what I'm making, please leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.